But just to be clear, it's not just a voter ID bill. It bans mail-in voting, which Republicans use in states like Utah and Florida.
Let me finish my point, Abby.
Okay.
I understand that there's nuance to the legislation, which is what I was going to say.
That's not going to cut it.
If things that are overwhelmingly bipartisan are good and should pass, I mean, voter ID is like 80-20 or 90-10. It seems to be overwhelmingly bipartisan.
Then why does Lisa Murkowski say this about the SAVE Act? Listen.
This is the only president in any of our lifetimes who has sought to overturn a democratic election by inciting a mob to do so. That is the person that we are now to believe is so exercised by protecting the integrity of the voting system that everything else has to stop to create it. That just doesn't seem plausible to me.
You guys are going to want to make sure that you stay to the very end of this clip, because in this clip, we see Black conservative Shermichael Singleton trying to run a bit of defense for the fact that Donald Trump is holding a bipartisan housing bill that would lower the cost of housing for Americans hostage, all because they won't pass his precious SAVE Act. And Abby, Phillip, as well as the rest of the panel, they just do not let him have it. As usual, let's watch the clip in full. I'll give you guys my thoughts towards the end. Let's get into it.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Tonight, President Trump could have been taking a victory lap. And for many people, the American dream could have been a little closer to reality. But instead, Trump is taking all of that away by holding affordable housing hostage until Congress passes legislation that would let him dramatically reshape how Americans vote. Now, this week, Congress passed the largest housing affordability bill in a generation. It got rare bipartisan support. His own White House called it historic and bragged that Trump had delivered on his promise to help American families. But just 24 hours later, just hours before he was supposed to sign it into law, Trump posted this ultimatum, canceling the event until lawmakers pass the Save America Act. It's a signature piece of his agenda that would severely tighten voter ID requirements, among other things. Now, Trump says that the housing bill pales in comparison to passing this voting legislation, and he criticized Senator Elizabeth Warren, who helped champion it. But Warren clapped back. Listen.
Donald Trump, we get all the way to the finish line, and like a petulant child, he says he's not going to do it. Up until about 11:30 this morning, Republicans were tweeting about what a great bill it is and how much they love it. And then along comes Donald Trump, stamps his little foot and says no.
I don't know if Trump forgot that he proposed the Elizabeth Warren piece of this bill, but he did. In January, he said, "I am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes. I'll be calling on Congress to codify it." Well, that was in this bill. That was the Elizabeth Warren proposal. Did he forget that that was also his proposal? And also, does he care that now he's taking off the table something that Republicans thought they could run on?
Well, I don't think he forgot, and I'm sure that Republicans who voted for it still think it's a good bill. I think it's pretty obvious the president just cares about this other thing more than he cares about this, and he's using these procedural levers to try to get some leverage over the Congress on it. Will it work? I don't know, but I don't know that necessarily means he's changed his mind about the policy, but he sees a moment where he can use his constitutional prerogatives to try to get them to do something that heretofore they've not done yet. Again, will this gambit work? Probably a low percentage.
Well, apparently he told lawmakers that nobody cares about affordable housing. Well, that the White House wouldn't comment on it, but that's what the reporting says.
I mean, I think it's odd that you have an event set up to start, the chairs are all lined up, people are on their way, and the president, posts that we're pulling this entire event down. I mean, it's so embarrassing, and I think this was a housing bill that we haven't had one in 30 years. I mean, housing costs are up 54% since 2020. This actually could have given Americans a much needed alleviation in the market. And when we talk about affordability, this could have been a huge win and victory lap actually for the president. But this was a total own goal. I mean, it's the strategy that this White House has and this president has. I mean, it's as clear as mud. It makes no sense.
What's clear as mud is that he had a tantrum, right?
Yeah.
You have children, you have children, you have children. I don't know about you guys. This is, a classic tantrum where he doesn't care what the consequences are. There's two things going on here. One is he does have this strange fixation with the SAVE Act, and no matter how many times the majority leader of the Senate, John Thune, the Republican, tells him the votes are not there to pass it, he's going to continue fixating on this. And two, he is mad, he is hot and mad and bothered because there's Republicans that have been standing up to him on issues like Iran. They had the vote yesterday to limit his War Powers Act, and I think that's got him very irritated. So in retaliation, on a day when he should have been celebrating the fact that Democrats are having all of this infighting, he pulls this stunt. And a few weeks ago, he said he didn't care about the midterms. I'm beginning to believe him. This would have been good for Republicans.
The point about the retaliation, Anna, is he actually hurts himself by the method of retaliation, because to Sabrina's point, I mean, affordability is a massive issue. The other thing that voters always complain about is the parties not being able to work together. Here you have a bipartisan measure aimed at an affordable issue, and he blows the thing up out of some sense of irritation that the Republican Party are not as subservient to him as he would like them to be.
Honestly, it was overwhelmingly bipartisan. Like, almost nothing happened. Almost nothing of significance happens that way.
The vote count was 85 to 5 in the Senate and 358 to 32 in the House. You could literally put a resolution in the House floor saying that puppies are good, and it wouldn't get this kind of bipartisan.
I totally agree.
If things that are overwhelmingly bipartisan are good and should pass, I mean, voter ID is like 80-20 or 90-10. It seems to be overwhelmingly bipartisan.
Then why does Lisa Murkowski say this about the SAVE Act? Listen.
If he chooses to hold up his own agenda because he wants action on the SAVE Act, that's, I guess, his call. It is not helpful to him. It's not helpful to the country. And it's not moving the needle. If you don't have the votes, sir, you don't have the votes.
I don't know what to say. I mean, first of all, it's not just a voter ID bill. It has all kinds of other silliness in it. That's why Lisa Murkowski says there are not the votes. That's why John Thune says there are not the votes. The SAVE Act is not going anywhere.
The votes aren't there. Senator Rick Scott out of Florida was quoted today, I think, in a political article, stating that he was going to talk to the president, just say, look, I've talked to several of my colleagues, even those that he thought once upon a time were persuadable, who have said, look, I just don't know if I can vote for this legislation. Now, I understand why the president wants it passed. I think if you were to take a poll and a survey on this, I think you'd probably get a pretty mixed bag. But I think most Americans generally would say, yeah, you got to show an ID in order to vote.
But just to be clear, it's not just a voter ID bill. It bans mail-in voting, which Republicans
Let me finish my point.
In states like Utah and Florida.
Let me finish my point, Abby.
Okay.
I understand that there's nuance to the legislation, which is what I was going to say.
That's not going to cut it.
But the point is, though, which I was going to make if you would have allowed me to, I understand that there's nuance to the legislation. I get that. There's always nuance to legislations. That said, though, I think on the housing front, with the overregulation of the market, the president's initial instinct several months ago with the 50-year mortgage idea, I didn't necessarily support it, but I thought it was a right direction, right, to try to look at this housing issue, a real crisis in the country for the past 35, 40 years, to say, how do we get younger Americans in houses at an affordable rate with interest rates that they can actually afford? This legislation was a part of the process to start restructuring and rechanging regulations to make it easier for builders to build without the overburdens that we have seen for the past decade or two now. So I think the president will eventually come around to this. I think if you're in the White House, they're probably telling him this is something that you can campaign on, Mr. President. It's a victory for you. It's a victory for Republicans. And so maybe at some point he comes and say, look, I don't have the votes for the SAVE Act. I'll move on. Let me campaign on something that gets people motivated.
This is going to become law, right? He may not not sign it. He might sit on it, but still, once they send it to him after 10 days, it becomes law.
Well, if they don't go on recess.
And he's not going to veto it, because if he vetoes it, he's in an even worse position, because they have a veto-proof vote that they can overturn.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to veto it.
So what he took away was the optic of being able to celebrate a win, to have all of these Republican leaders around him in the House and the Senate and do rah-rah, we passed the housing bill and we care about it.
We're addressing affordability.
That is kind of negligence and stupid.
Yeah, but hold on a second.
well,
Anna,
politically,
before,
I mean-
let me get in there just for a second, Shermichael, because we're talking here about the congressional procedures and priorities and nuance, as you say. The argument from the White House or from the president is the Save America Act is a national emergency, therefore everything has to be held for that. This is the only president in any of our lifetimes who has sought to overturn a democratic election by inciting a mob to do so. That is the person that we are now to believe is so exercised by protecting the integrity of the voting system that everything else has to stop to create it. That just doesn't seem plausible to me.
I mean, just yesterday he was saying he called the U.S. attorney to ask him to do him a favor.
Right.
And
the
Republican in California get on the ballot
but the point
for
being
November.
about the housing issue, which I think Anna was making a brilliant point. You know, right now, there's been a big discussion in the country in terms of national politics, the 30-plus special elections that Democrats have won, on Republicans aren't focused enough on cost of living. If you are to believe some of the polling data that's out there, independent swing voters appear to have believed that. In my opinion, as a strategist, any opportunity we can have as a party to chip away at that message, now that you have Democrats also electing socialists, I think that's another thing that we can add to the contrast and the marketing as we get closer to midterms. I think is a net gain to the party, which is why I think at some point the president eventually comes back to
So
this.
you agree with Sabrina when she says this is an own goal? Like the president had a win in his pocket. He, snatches defeat from the jaws of victory and decides to put all of his political capital into this fictitious issue of voter fraud that he's been harping on. I want to read this excerpt from Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's book, Regime Change. It describes perhaps what's going on here. They say, in his second term, unlike his first, he was willing to take breathtaking risks that could throw not only his presidency, but the Republican Party and the entire world into chaos and carnage. More than ever before as president, he was operating on pure gut instinct. This seems like just Trump worrying about Trump's latest hobby horse and forgetting what the best interest of his party is.
Well, I don't think this is just his instinct. I've been all over the country lately and talked to a lot of people out there. This Save America Act, it's not just him thinking about it. Millions of Republicans across the country are worried about it. They're asking about it. They're asking their members of Congress about it. You talk to a member of Congress, they'll tell you the number of calls they're getting on it. I'm sure he's hearing about it. So I think, I'll just play devil's advocate on the strategy piece. I'm not arguing the housing bill is bad. In fact, it might be good to campaign on. But you could see a world where if Republicans who love President Trump perceive that he was giving up on this thing that they actually really care about, that would be politically depressive to them heading into a midterm where off-year turnout is already an issue for Republicans.
Isn't it politically depressive that he
that's a part of the
didn't
calculation.
sign?
We have to factor that in.
I mean, just taking the point that Scott was making, isn't it politically depressive that he took what should have been a massive victory lap for the party and instead totally blew it up, ripped it up? And I think to what Anna was saying earlier, it's like, does he actually care about the midterms? And that kind of goes to what this book has been reporting. Like, he is a lame duck president. He's not on the ballot again. I think we have seen his priorities be about enrichment for himself and his families, for his family, and his priorities are not necessarily on the midterms or supporting Republicans.
Time and again, do things against what the base cares about, right? Like not going into foreign wars, not releasing the full extent of the Epstein files. And frankly, I think the reason you're hearing so much about the SAVE Act is because he won't shut up about it. There is two things he won't shut up about. His ballroom, well, actually three. His arch and the SAVE Act. If he
Don't forget about the reflecting pool.
Oh, the reflecting. Well, I think he wants to forget about the reflecting pool now. So I think that's part of the reason why you're hearing about it. If his base is hearing it from him, they will regurgitate it and repeat it and be calling their Congress people about it.
But I think, the part of the calculus for us has to be, though, to your point, Scott, if this doesn't pass, can you maintain the base while still shifting to this housing issue and chipping away at some of those independent swing voters to inoculate some Republicans who are running in more challenging districts? I think the math would probably say we could.
I mean, the math says you don't have the votes, so it doesn't. I mean, you could push this all you want, but if you don't have the votes, it's not.
And you didn't have the votes months ago, and that was
and
before
that's not gonna change.
that was
Yeah,
before he
that's-
antagonized John Cornyn. That was before he lost Bill Cassidy.
Mm-hmm.
That is before Susan Collins is dealing with a very tough race in Maine. So if he didn't have the votes 2 months ago, 3 months ago, he has even less votes today. Remember, John Cornyn had like completely changed his mind
did.
on overturning the filibuster. I bet you he's now gone back to his original position.
All right, next for us, Trump gets into it.
So I hope you guys won't unfollow me or unsubscribe for what it is that I'm about to say, but I just want to keep it 100% real with you guys. This is the reason why I say to vote for Donald Trump, you have to be an idiot. And I know that's not the right thing to say. You know, you probably shouldn't be saying that sort of thing to independents, swing voters and whatnot. Listen, I hear it, but this is just another example of the type of little child that Donald Trump is. Now, I want you guys to understand the significance of exactly what's happening here. Donald Trump is holding lower rent and more homes for Americans hostage to force through a voting bill that just does not have the votes. I want you guys to really understand that. And this is meant to be the man who tries to convince people and tries to convince his base that he's fighting for them. This was one of the things that was bipartisan, and Republicans actually got it done, working across the aisle in Congress. And literally, Donald Trump killed it in 2 hours before signing because it stopped his agenda. Now, just through just a little bit of research, let me break down for you guys what this housing bill would have done for Americans. It funds the building of new homes, which more supply obviously means lower prices over time. You know, lower rent and lower housing prices means more people have housing, and then more people can actually afford to buy a home. It stops big investment firms from buying up single family houses, because those firms are the ones that drive up the prices and the rents. And that means more homes are available for actual American families to be able to buy. And there's less competition from Wall Street landlords. And the goal overall of this bill was simple: cheaper housing and more of it. And it passed with both parties backing it, which is extremely rare in the current political climate. And Donald Trump is holding it hostage, all because of the fact that they won't put through his Save America Act. But the panel are right. Donald Trump doesn't care about his presidency right now. He doesn't. Because if he did, he wouldn't be holding something hostage that he could have actually used for a win for himself and for his party heading into the midterms. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Honestly, Shermichael Singleton, Scott Jennings, the lengths that these guys will go to try and justify Donald Trump's stupidity. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section.